Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very serious story. I believe the Civil War has begun.
What?
And yes, it has started. And here's the story. Breaking news, at least one person injured as violence breaks out between parents and LGBTQ supporters at LA elementary school. That's right. A pride flag was burned and middle-aged women were swinging signs at each other. It is the Civil War.
That's it. That's how it starts.
It's how it starts.
I've seen worse at Black Friday sales.
It'd be really crazy if the Civil War actually starts with like a 52-year-old, morbidly obese woman waving a, pride sign, and then some like middle-aged mom being like, "Get away from my kids," and then she like hits her with a cardboard sign, but she falls over and like hits her head and gets seriously injured, and then people go nuts, and then 100 years, they're like, the Civil War started when
the wave heard around the world.
Yeah.
When the American Civil War, I was thinking like it wasn't ideological. It wasn't, because we talk about like what would cause that: abortion, something like this, trans rights, but it was economic. That war was economic, and they used the war to free the slaves. Like Lincoln was idealistic, but he used the economic war. So like it was. Do you think that it would not have happened if there was no slavery at that time?
It was ideological.
Well, I think it was that the South didn't want to pay the North taxes anymore, and so they're like, "No, you're going to be staying with us, and we're going to be collecting your taxes."
It's way more complicated than that. But when you had a caning in Congress, that is not about economics. That is tribal hatred and a division of cultures. So it was an ideological divide in this country.
Oh, okay. So something sparked an economic divide. I see. But
well, the economic divide is a contributor to the tribal split, but the tribal split was very much rooted in a plethora of issues, and we've talked about it a bit because I am no Civil War historian, but the initial states that seceded were later joined by I think 4 other states who initially did not secede, and it was only after Lincoln called for I think it was conscription to send people down to quell the rebellion or whatever, that several other states were like, okay, we're voting for secession. And the interesting thing is, in these states, it's not like Virginia said, we all 100% agree. No, it was split in their legislature. It was mostly, no, we don't want to do this. Then after the start of the conflict, they said, okay, we're going to revote. And then they leaned more so. I think it was like 2-1 or something. And that's when the Confederacy decided to make their capital in Virginia, because Virginia wasn't one of the original states to secede. So anyway, long story short, it was heavily ideological in that a large catalyst was Southern states believed that Lincoln would abolish slavery, and it was a huge component of their economies, but very many wealthy individuals profiting from it, whereas most people in Southern states did not own slaves. I think it was like 5% or something really small. Yeah. And then Lincoln was like, no, we're just going to stop the expansion of it into new states. Before he even got elected, before he was even inaugurated, they seceded. I think it was he got elected, then they seceded, then he gets inaugurated. Then a few months later, conflict breaks out. So anyway, I don't want to start the whole thing.
There's a famous saying, all wars are bankers' wars. And while Tim's absolutely right that it was a very complicated story with the Civil War, this is why I oppose the sanction regime that exists from the American empire. It's always couched in this concept of we're looking after the downtrodden, these poor Ukrainians. We have to now sanction and kick Russia off of SWIFT and yada, yada, yada. It ultimately serves as a catalyst for more conflict and more death than it does deterring it, in my opinion.
I do want to go back and say the article in question we have, I was not intending to start a big Civil War debate. My point was just more so that parents have begun fighting with LGBTQ activists. This is.
I think LGBTQ activists started fighting with parents long ago.
Right.
Now parents are fighting back.
Well, right. So the fact that it's getting to this level is showing that this will not stand. Parents are saying it's a red line for me.
About time.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it's the catalyst.
Look at the sign. Stop grooming our kids.
And it started during COVID. That was I've said it before. I'll say it again. That was the silver lining of COVID was the Zoom classrooms and them being able to peer into the classrooms and see what the hell was actually going on in these classrooms and the propaganda they were pushing on these children.
You can't make a sign that has a word that runs on to the next line, though. That's
what does it say? Hold on, let's see this.
Stop utilizing our kids.
You can't do that.
Come on,
that's
brother.
True. I mean, I agree with the sign.
Get it together.
With what he's saying, but it could have been put together better. But I appreciate him being there.
Stop sex.
Stop sex.
It's like a run-on sign.
It's a cult, man.
There is no pride in
I'm happy though.
Signs are all great though.
It's about time that like if parents weren't willing to stand up for their kids when they were being forced masked, but like finally this is a catalyst. It's just amazing to me like what it took to get parents actually involved with this stuff.
I don't like calling it indoctrination though. I really don't.
Indoctrination's
Because
good.
I
it is
really
very good.
don't like calling it indoctrination.
Calling what
We want
indoctrination?
indoctrination. We want teachers to wave American flags and to show, like, here are the founding fathers and the things they believed, to indoctrinate American values into these children.
Like literally indoctrinating people into sexual perversion, so they'll do things that you consider sexually gratifying and trying to remove them from parental supervision. Like, that's not indoctrination, that's grooming. That is grooming. That's why we
Yes.
call it grooming.
But so a lot of people say, like, hey, don't indoctrinate my kids. Like, no. Don't indoctrinate them with the weird Marxist stuff.
Right.
Do indoctrinate them with classical liberal ideologies of the founding fathers.
But
Everyone
this is outside
indoctrinates,
of
that's the thing.
this is outside
Right,
of
right.
Marxism and patriotism, right? This is a totally different category of degeneracy and things that should not be.
I think it slots in
Taught to
quite
children.
nicely with Marxism, actually.
Agree. Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
I feel like indoctrination is too kind of a word for what's happening.
Also, agree.
Grooming.
There you go.
What would you? Is the word too hot for TV? The word that you are considering
Grooming.
calling it?
Probably.
Abuse.
I used to feel like,
Abuse?
man, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to manipulate people into worshiping the flag because this country's responsible for so much death and horror across Earth. Of course, a lot of countries are.
Exactly.
But
Name a
now,
country that's not.
Yeah, now I'm more into like the Constitution than I am into the flag. Maybe the flag's supposed to like identify our Constitution. I hope it does.
What's
to
your
people.
beef with the flag?
Well, blind allegiance. I don't like that. I want to know
Yeah.
what I'm swearing my allegiance to beyond just a color and a picture.
And
That's how I feel about a lot of these presidential debates too. It just
And
feels very.
Well, it's
It's
important.
tough.
Tribal.
It's tough because the government doesn't really reflect the American ethos anymore. So, like, does that flag still represent the American ethos? I'm not sure. I still look at it fondly, but I can understand why someone might look at it and go, like, well, yeah, this is 100 years of empire and control over the global frame. Like, is that something I want to pledge allegiance to? I don't know.
Do you think they haven't made a 51st state because they're like these weird cultists, these weird like occult dudes that are like 50 is such a round number. Let's stay here forever.
I agree with that. I feel like 51 would be weird.
We'll just have to. We'll
I
have
don't
to.
like
If we,
that.
we'll start a new state, but we'll just lump it in with a pre-existing
We have-
state.
I mean, we have,
this is
like,
the
Puerto
territory
Rico.
of Idaho.
We have a 51st
We'll call Puerto
state.
Rico
It's
like
called
part of
Ukraine.
Idaho. That's what we're gonna do.
We give them more welfare than any other state. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather we took, was it 150 billion or whatever?
Yeah.
Literally just give it to Puerto Rico.
Oh, Puerto Rico needs the
Puerto
help,
Rico's-
man.
yeah.
They got hit by that
Just literally,
hurricane
like,
like,
I
2 years
hey,
ago.
We need
We're
to
go-
take away the government's credit card.
We're going to economically develop this
Spending
part of
rights.
our own country. Like, we have parts of our own. Dude, I would rather they gave $150 million to a random veteran.
I would rather they
agree.
just didn't
Like,
take
you
that
know
money
what?
from people to start
I'm sorry,
with.
is it billion? It's billion, right?
150 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they should literally just be like, if a Republican in Congress should say, from now, like, I'm going to introduce a bill that says all new funding for Ukraine will instead be placed into a random lottery for a veteran.
Yeah, or
So it's just like,
I
One day you get a phone call and they're like, we know you retired a couple
It's
years
better
ago,
than
but
their research on golf and space.
you just
really.
won
We spent a
$100
lot of
billion.
money.
Oh, really?
The money was going to go to Ukraine, but this new bill went through and the money's yours. And they're going to go, okay. I don't know."
tax refund. I think give it back to the people who earned it.
Well, the
Give
truth,
that money
the
back.
truth is that they can't give it back. That's all.
Or
printed,
pay off the debt.
It's all printed and borrowed money.
That's true.
So
Right.
Yeah. Just get rid of it, pay off the debt, whatever it is.
Think
But
about what they could do with $150 billion. They could make, they could build a spaceship. You know, they could build a lot of spaceships with that. They could.
well, the private sector could. The Democrats and the
No, I'm
government they
saying,
probably take.
I'm saying
No, I know.
they pay a private company. They could.
they could have bought Twitter 3 times over.
That's right. They could have bought a bunch of Twitters.
And isn't it funny that when Elon Musk bought Twitter, it was how many poor people could he have fed with this? Like, okay, every
Yep.
time the government throws far more absurd sums of money at nonsense, we never hear this that could have fed the poor argument ever. The closest they'll come to it is we could have spent this on social welfare programs while ignoring that, like, our social welfare spending actually outpaces our military budget. People don't realize this. The amount we spend on welfare, Medicare, Medicaid, all of the different meddling in the healthcare industry and Social Security, it's insane. It's insane. We spend so much money on all
31
of this.
trillion.
And we're $31 trillion in debt.
gotta
And
be
they're
honest.
like, well, I don't like how Elon spent that money. You're concerned about how Elon is spending his money? Are you serious? What about the way the government is spending your money?
He's the
I-
only
I'm
one trying
gonna-
to save humanity.
I'm going to say something controversial, but I think it is true. We would, as a country, be better off with the $150 billion going to Hunter Biden if he couldn't spend it on Ukraine instead of Ukraine. Because at the very least, he'd be spending it in the United States, or like if that was it, like
The crack trade would flourish.
it would
Really-
erupt. I mean,
But
like what I'm saying is, think of the worst person in this country, the worst person you know, and just
give
say
the money to him and not the government.
we're going to give you $150 billion. It has to be spent in the United States, and you can't do anything illegal. We would be better off than giving it to Ukraine.
But the thing that's good about the
domestic
Ukraine,
manufacturing, war, what is it good for?
Yeah, the thing
Increasing
about
domestic
the
manufacturing.
Ukraine thing that's good for the bankers is that we loaned 150 billion to Ukraine, so Ukraine is going to have to borrow 150 billion from the Bank of International Settlements to pay it back to us. Then the Bank for International Settlements gets to collect interest on 300 billion because they loan.
I think it's IMF, but same
Ian
difference.
just
It is?
discovered
I think so.
that it's one
Yes.
big circle jerk.
And then when the war is over, whatever happens, Ukraine will forever be paying debt.
Or what they'll
to
do is they'll say, instead of
machine.
paying the debt, we're just going to take your land. We're going to own it now. It'll
Yep.
belong to BlackRock or our subsidiary is
The
BlackRock.
future
or
for Ukraine is very, very bleak, and that's assuming we avoid any sort of nuclear exchange.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.